Welcome back, friends, to our next installment of Friends and Relationships. So far, we've covered some of the history of relationships and making friendships around the world, around cultures, and some different variables that go into making it happen naturally or things that make us have to work at it a bit more. And last week, we talked about what it means if you don't like to be around people, some ways to talk to yourself about yourself so that in your mind and in your heart, you're able to set yourself up for success in having relationships with people and eventually making friends with people. Today, we're going to step forward a little farther and talk about just some of the basic ingredients, something that's just super simple, 4 or 5 very basic steps that are probably obvious on the surface, but sometimes have a little bit more nuance, a little bit more challenge behind them because of the nature of them. So let's join together and walk through some of the basics of friends and relationships. So first off, a quick overview of the basic ingredients we're going to cover today, then we'll cover them one at a time. First off is to add people. Obviously, in order to have relationships and friendships, you have to have people. So we're going to start off with adding people, or maybe you already have people in your life, and so you're first off going to select some people out of the people you already have. Second is simply to have conversations. We'll talk about what that means, how to progress into conversations over time, and maybe how to develop some of those skills. Number 3, do something together. After you've had good conversations over a period of time, you're going to begin adding activities in, small activities, medium activities, large activities. But you begin to spend time with the person and do things with them and just have natural time together. Next up is simply to be there for the long haul. Once you've got these first 3 things done, you've got the basic things out there to make relationships and friendships. Now it's time to bake that friendship so it's going to solidify and become something that perhaps you're looking for, something you'd like to have. So being there for the long haul is where genuine ties of affection and communication and understanding and deep friendships actually begin to develop over time. And finally, we'll talk about it is what it is, that you should just enjoy what's there, because it's not always the case that when you gather supplies for cookies and put them all together and bake them, that they're always going to turn out the same way. Sometimes there's variability in what happens there, and regardless of what the product is, you can still enjoy it for what it is. And so let's unpack what it looks like to put ingredients together, the right ingredients, to assemble them in a certain way, in a certain order, to let them work their magic as it were, and then to enjoy them. So step 1, or the first basic ingredient, is simply to add or select people in your life that you would like to make a relationship with, that you would like to eventually become friends with. This, for some people, may become a natural thing. Maybe it's someone that you see at work, or maybe it's someone in your neighborhood. Maybe it's someone that your kids go to school with, if you have kids, or that you went to school with in the past. Or maybe it's where you shop. Maybe it's just a matter of selecting a few people that you want to see if you can try to make a relationship with them. Maybe it's somebody in your neighborhood that you know that you see them quite a bit, but you really haven't connected with them. So for a lot of people, it's just selecting some people. Or maybe your schedule is such where you really rarely interact with people and you have to go out of your way to do so. And especially these days with COVID and online things and virtual everything, you may have to work a little bit more at finding a class to get into online, or talking to people at a store, or places where you naturally interact with folks. But just because we are quarantining and not seeing people as much as we have been in the past, doesn't mean it's impossible to add or select people into your life. For example, in the neighborhood that we used to live in, I'm still on the Homeowners Association board, and so we have monthly gatherings on Zoom where you can meet and see all the people in your neighborhood and meet folks you maybe haven't seen before, haven't talked to in a while, but you look for ways to add or select people that you would like to attempt to over time, have a relationship with, or become friends with. So that's basically step 1. Once you've picked out 1, 2, 3, 4, however many people that you want to begin practicing this discipline of having relationships with or developing a friendship with, simply begin having conversations with people. Doesn't have to be a long conversation. You can start with, hey, how you doing? Sharing, how's the weather going? That kind of stuff. Some short conversations, some long conversations if they actually just form naturally there. small, medium, large, extra large, just different kinds of conversations with a person over a period of time. For example, I go to the same stores as often as I possibly can because I want to meet people and get to know them for who they are in their environment. So a few years ago, I met a checker at a grocery store in town and attempted to begin talking to him and over easy topics, just how's the weather, and he wasn't an easy person to talk to. He's still someone who's kind of hard to talk to. But another person in that same store, another person who worked there, we began having conversations over easy topics. And easy topics are just common ground. For example, he works in the grocery store and I asked him about a product. He saw that I was buying corned beef for whatever reason at that time. And he asked me, do you know what's in corned beef? And I said, no, I have no idea. And so we talked about corned beef. And the next time I went back to the store, he was like, corned beef, and pointed to me, and we talked a little bit more and laughed a bit. But we began having longer and longer conversations, sharing a little bit more about life, talking about different things. I asked him about where he went to church, and he asked me about where I went to church, and I invited him to come to our church. He already has a church home, and we talked about a lot of different things over a long period of time. And eventually, at the end of that year, I came in one day. I noticed I hadn't seen him in a while at that store, and I said, how have you been? Haven't seen you in a bit. And he said, pray for me. And I said, okay, I will. He said, I lost my son this month. And so over a period of time, we went through a lot of different conversations, from nothing to just having fun to saying hey in passing to he wanted to share with me that his son had died and asked me to pray for him. So just begin working through different kinds of conversations with people. It doesn't have to be complicated. And also have a sense of how much is too much. Don't stand in line at a grocery store and keep someone from doing their job. Don't hold someone too long. Begin noticing their social cues. If they're backing up and trying to get out of the room or trying to get out of the yard and go back to their house, get a feel for what's enough in a conversation. But begin looking for easy topics and just keep it up. Just keep trying over and over again. A really easy thing to remember is if a conversation is hard to get with someone, ask them about themselves. Don't say things like, what's wrong with you? Don't get that personal. That's really, really, really wrong. But ask about obvious things. Like if it's someone in the neighborhood and they've got kids, you might just say, hey, I noticed you got kids. How's it going with school for your kids this year with all this COVID stuff and all the lockdowns and whatnot? But find some easy thing about them that they possibly could share and wouldn't feel threatened about it. But basically, over time, you are finding ways to have conversations with people. In Scripture, Paul says to let your conversation be seasoned with salt, to be seasoned with grace. That you are somebody who can talk with somebody at their level, that you are interacting with them in ways that obviously are building them up. You're not coming across as manipulative or some other nefarious reason that you're trying to have a conversation with them, but you're just having a conversation like a normal human being. So step one is to select or add some people. Step two is to begin having conversations over a period of time. If after a while the conversations seem like they're going well, they're lasting a little bit longer every now and so often, and you get a sense that they don't mind being around you, a next step to go with developing a relationship with someone, hoping to eventually develop into a friendship, is to just simply begin doing things together, asking them to do something with you. Just like the conversation, start small, progress over time to larger things, don't rush into it. Do some things that seem natural, normal, and obvious, and non-threatening. First off, you can take them some food. Maybe you've made some cookies. Maybe you're someone who smokes meat or has a special dish that you cook, and you just make a little extra one day and you take it to them wherever they happen to be and just say, hey, I made some extra smoked sausage this week. I thought of you because of one of our conversations we had. I want to bring this over to you. And so you're doing something with them. You're just in their presence, maybe on their front step, dropping something off. And they're seeing you outside of that normal environment where you don't normally talk. And you are doing something with them just by bringing them something. Maybe you ask them to go to lunch. Say, I'm going to be downtown this next week. I know that you work downtown or wherever it is. And hey, I've seen this restaurant over here. Let's meet, if you don't mind, at 11:30 on Tuesday and try that out. I heard they're open now for dining, and let's try that out. Just something very simple. Next, some basic, easy things to do, especially with neighbors, is to borrow something. Maybe you're trying to get some project done in your house, and you're out of something. Maybe you're out of milk or sugar or eggs. I know that when we moved into our new neighborhood this last summer, my wife was making some dish, and we were out of eggs and out of butter. And she said, you know what, I'm gonna go ask these neighbors over here who came and talked to us first. So she went and knocked on their door, they invited her in, they had a nice conversation, they got some more information about the neighborhood, and they were very glad to give her some of those things that we needed. Maybe you're working on putting together some piece of furniture or something, you need a hammer or a screwdriver, go and ask people to borrow something. There's nothing that binds you together with somebody else more than taking something that belongs to them, because there's this expectation you're going to bring it back. And so that's a thing that you can do together. You can also help them. Maybe you know that they're getting ready to work in their yard, or maybe you know that they're getting ready to do something important at their job. You can offer to help them with something and then go do it. You can also do something together by calling them up and asking them for advice. Hey, I'm getting ready to do my taxes. The accountant I used to use is now out of town. Can you recommend somebody? That kind of thing. Where you are opening yourself up to them, expressing a need of some sort, where they have to spend some time sharing with you some more, you're having a conversation, and you're going a little bit further, a little bit deeper in terms of doing things together. And there's a whole lot of other things we can add here, but you get the sense that as the conversations deepen, you can begin adding activities with that, where you actually have time where your proximity is closer and you are involved in a shared activity. But over time, just like your conversations, you're starting out small, perhaps getting deeper, you begin doing things together, and over a period of time, just being together, doing things together, can begin to deepen and add a relationship. For example, in our previous neighborhood that we lived in, it was snowed out a lot one night, and I just happened to look out the front blinds, and I noticed my neighbor is out in the front corner of our yard where our yards meet, and it's like 4 or 5 inches of snow and it's still coming down. And he's got one of those manhole covers open over where his water is turned on and off. And I run out there real quick and just say, hey, what's going on? He says, one of the pipes in our house busted, and I can't get this pipe to turn off, and it's flooding our basement. And so I ran back into my garage and got the specific tool that's used to turn on and off water. And I'm out there with him, and we're both not in like work clothes. We're like in pajamas because it's a snow day. And we're out there freezing to death, but working together, getting wet, getting snow all over us. And we get his water turned off. And that's probably been 7, 8 years ago that event happened. And to this day, we talk about those kinds of things because I helped him and he's helped me with different things over a period of time. But basically, you're just looking for opportunities to be together with people and just have proximity and shared activity. A quick side note, and kind of a hailing back to the first 2 lessons we talked about, it's important to do these things on purpose, or to be proactive in doing those things, because a lot of times we don't have friends and relationships because we just wait for them to happen naturally on their own. And if that's you and you don't want to do extra work, that's fine. But if you're looking to make relationships and to develop friendships, you have to do a lot of these things on purpose. Think about when you were growing up in school. A lot of times you're forced to be together in classrooms full of kids of the same age, possibly similar backgrounds. And over a period of time, because you're forced together in proximity, you began trying to figure out who you can be with, who seems like they're like you in some way, who likes the same things you like, who doesn't like the same things you don't like, that kind of stuff. And so you begin to, in an artificially created environment, begin to make friends, and you begin to like the same people who like the same things you do, like sports or TV shows or music or whatever it is. And you begin to find that you are drawn to people, or you gravitate toward people who are similar to you. Obviously, that doesn't work for some people. For some people, they went through school and that did not click for them. Friends didn't click for them. And if that's you, I'm sorry that happened to you, because I know that happens to a lot of folks. But this may be a better thing for you at this point in your life, because you don't have any preconceived notions about some of those things, and making some of these steps into relationships and friendships might be a little bit easier for you, because you're just following the recipe, you're making the product by putting all these ingredients together, and you didn't come to think about friendship in terms of what just happened to you naturally. So you've met some people, or you've selected some people, you began having conversations with them, and then you've begun doing things with them. The fourth step, or the fourth ingredient, is to simply be there for the long haul. If you've done those first three steps and you're doing step number 4, where you're just continuing having conversations, continuing doing things together with these people, you have arrived. Proximity, or closer proximity with people, plus shared activity, plus a period of time, over a period of time, equals an ongoing relationship. Now, the nature of that relationship may get really great. It may just stay the same. We'll talk about that on the 5th step there. But this is the step where you are actually baking the product. You are baking at 350 for however many minutes. Over a period of time, you're doing these things together over and over again. This is where relationships are. And the feelings may or may not come with them, as we'll talk about in step number 5 there. But nonetheless, you are doing what a relationship is. Over a period of time, when you're with these people, if you notice that there's something great happening in their life, celebrate it with them. They get a new job, a grandchild is born, something good happens, you celebrate with them, big and small. If something bad happens with them, you mourn with them. If they lose a job, someone in their house, their family dies, they get sick. You're doing things that reflect what Paul says in Romans 12, where you weep with those who weep, and that you rejoice with those who rejoice. That over a long period of time, that's the real thing that bakes this stuff together, is that you are with that person and that you are simply doing life together on whatever frequency it naturally happens to occur. That you're making these things happen because you're being intentional, you're doing it on purpose, and you're doing it for the long haul. And there you're having now an ongoing relationship. This 5th step, or this 5th ingredient in this process of relationships and friends, for some people it is the most depressing and frustrating part of the process, and for others it is a sense of relief and joy to know this. After you've gone through the other 4 steps, you've picked or met some people, you're having conversations, you're doing things together with them, you're in it for the long haul. The 5th step is simply to know that it is what it is. There are going to be mixed expectations about what friendships and relationships are, and from what people want or desire out of friendships and relationships. I'll give you an example. When I was in college many years ago, decades ago, I was friends with several different people at different levels, different depths. And there was a collection of guys who hung out on a different wing in the dorm from where I was. But I saw them, there was one guy in particular I had class with. We talked, we had lunch together occasionally with, and we prayed together, that kind of stuff. And one Saturday night, for whatever reason, he said, "Can you come down to my room for a few minutes?" And I sat across from him on his roommate's bed, and he just, long story short, said, "You know, I think I've invested a lot into our friendship, and I just don't feel like I'm getting reciprocation out of this. I feel like you're not in this like I'm in this." And he kind of laid it out there that he wanted me to be better or deeper or more committed friend with him than I was being. In my mind, I was going way out of my way to be friends with him because he was a nice guy. Some people kind of ostracized him because of certain characteristics about him. But he wanted even more. And I'm not saying it's some kind of weird sexual thing or something like that. He just wanted me to be a closer friend. And we had to have a hard conversation. And I know it hurt him and it hurt me to realize that we were at different levels of expectation about what it was going to be like. And so that brings up this idea of expectations versus anticipation. When you are going through this process, it's important to temper your expectations. Expectations are often the seeds of resentment. When we have this preconceived notion in our mind of what friends or relationships are supposed to feel or look like, when they actually do come into reality and we're doing the things that friends and people in relationships do, and they don't match up to that, we often feel cheated. And maybe we'll blame that other person for why it's not going like we want it to. So it's important not to have these big expectations, but instead to have anticipation. That in the process of all that stuff happening, that we're looking forward to the good things that come out of it. Because in anticipation, when good things happen, we are surprisingly full of joy because of the good things that we're seeing there. So I would encourage us to always remember expectations versus anticipation in these relationships. It's not always going to be the case that when you go through those 4 steps that everything's going to click. There are some people who you may spend some time with them, conversations, doing stuff together with them, but it doesn't just click any further. It doesn't go any farther down. There's no click there. It's just you see them on a regular basis. You do stuff together occasionally. Maybe you watch a football game or whatever activity it is, but you don't feel an emotional click, as it were. For some people, it will click pretty quickly. Maybe it takes just the right thing to happen, the right thing is said or done, and suddenly you realize that you have a lot of stuff in common, that you know each other pretty well, and suddenly there's just this chemistry that happens, and you're these kinds of friends that you in your mind have always thought it was supposed to feel like. But it doesn't always happen that way. So just keep in mind this whole idea of expectation versus anticipation. If it doesn't click, let it be what it is. Enjoy it for what it is, and just let that be the blessing that it is, because you may be surprised that over a period of time, it may be a year or 2 later, that it does click. That if you're invested into those people, into that person, it does click and it doesn't have that weird feeling anymore. A quick warning about that as well. It's important, and this may seem odd coming from a church Bible class, don't ever make friends with the idea of your main goal is to get them to church or to get them to come to know Jesus in some way. Now, that sounds weird, but when we do people that way, we're using people. We are in the process of manipulating people, actually. What often happens, that I see at least, is people go make friendships with people with the express purpose of inviting them to church, inviting them to come to know the Lord through having this conversation eventually about where do you go to church, where are you going to go when you die, that kind of stuff. Not that those are bad things, but if that's your only reason for connecting with someone and making a relationship, what often happens is when they rebuff your invitation to church, or they at some point possibly shut you down and let you know that they won't have anything to do with your God, your Jesus, that kind of stuff, what I've often seen happen is people will just walk away from them. And they realize that after you've done that, after you've gotten disappointed that they didn't come to church with you and you've just walked away, they smell it just smells awful. It's an awful witness for the Lord. God doesn't treat us that way. God goes out of his way to love us and show us his mercy, his goodness, in spite of whether or not we accept him all the time. And so if you're looking for relationships and friendships, don't make it around trying to get them to come to church. That's a whole other conversation. We can get into at another class. Also, be careful that as you're getting further into these relationships, that you don't bring the expectations of, now that I've got this friend, I'm going to lean into them and they're going to fix a problem I've got, or they're going to be my friend for life, or my buddy, or the missing dad I didn't have, that kind of stuff. It's really important that you don't do that, because what often happens is you lean in too hard and they begin to see that you are a mess and that you're coming to them, whether or not you even realize it, with things that they're not ready to handle, and they pull away. So be careful that you're not manipulating people for personal reasons, and that you're also not using them to fix some problem that perhaps you're not even aware of. And perhaps we'll have another follow-up to that this next week about how to understand how to deal with it is what it is. But for the most part, make sure that you let it be what it is. Take advantage of the opportunity to be with those people, to serve them, to share life together. Don't push for more than seems natural in terms of the responses that they're given to you. Make sure that you are in the whole process honoring God, you're reflecting God and how he is with you through how you deal with people. So that's basically the 5 things I wanted you to see this week, is that you pick some people, you add people to your life, you have conversations that progress over time, you add activities that you do together, that you're just spending time together in proximity and shared activities, that you're doing it for the long haul because you want to bake that stuff in and really get to know each other and do life together. And finally, when you're realizing this ongoing relationship really is going on, let it be what it is. When you pull those cookies out of the oven, sometimes they're the best cookies in the world. Sometimes you pull them out and you realize you forgot to add something, and you got to just eat them or throw them out, whatever it is. But enjoy it for what it is. Don't use people, but use the situation you have to love them as God has loved you. I want to wrap up today with this. Some reminders from our first week. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for a time of adversity. In Proverbs 27:6, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. And finally, from John 15, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. To interact with people as God has interacted with us means that we are there for them. We're choosing on purpose to love and to serve them for who they are, not necessarily looking for what they can give back to us, but instead we are looking to serve them and love them as God has loved us and served us. And when you add that layer to it, you are someone who can be in some pretty great relationships and some pretty great friends. So next week, we're going to walk into some of the finer points of these things we've talked about tonight, maybe answer some of the questions you've got. At the end of this video, you'll see my email address. I encourage you to send me any emails or questions you have through email, or you can even post on Facebook at the bottom of the video that we've got here and let us know that as well. Hope you have a great rest of the week. This coming Sunday, Leon's going to have a great message for us out of Hebrews again about how we can grow through suffering, just like Jesus did. There are lots of things we go through in life that are hard, but through those times we can trust that God is teaching us and showing us some good things. And it kind of goes back to this, that we anticipate that regardless of what we go through, that we're going to see God at work. Romans 8:28 kinds of things, where we know that God's going to work all things together for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. You have a blessed week, and we will see you on Sunday.